everybody, to the Oklahoma Drill Podcast. I am your host, Andrew. We have your co-host, Matt and Vitor here as well. This week is going to be the continuation of our position preview series. We're going to be talking about the tight ends, going through the roster as a whole, like always. We're going to start a little bit differently this time. Rather than jumping straight into the roster, we're going to go through a little history of Shanahan tight ends in general and how you don't always need to have a tight end. The system will kind of find one. So, guys, I'm going to lead off real quick and just name off a few names throughout history of players that were not really highly regarded before they played in this system at tight end and went on to enjoy really successful careers. And it starts with undrafted Shannon Sharpe in Denver under Mike Shanahan, the original. He was the first one that went from an undrafted player to a Hall of Fame tight end playing in the Shanahan system. You have Owen Daniels in Houston, also in his time in Denver under Gary Kubiak, which is another disciple of the same system. George Kittle was a fifth-round pick, or I believe he was a fifth-round pick for San Francisco, and no one expected him to be the arguably best tight end in the NFL. You can go down the list on and on. I'm sure there's guys I'm forgetting, but the scheme will create opportunities for tight ends to produce like it does for a lot of players on the offense, to be quite honest. And I think this is something we need to be cognizant of, where a lot of people were worried about the Jets don't have a tight end, or were worried about Chris Herndon if he's ever going to make the next step. And they signed Tyler Croft, who's more of a blocker. And so we're all wondering, George Kittle was such a big factor for San Francisco. Who's going to be playing that role? Well, it might not have to be that way. And it might be that we'll find a guy to fit the role that we need based on what the system schemes open. Guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, when you talk about the way that the 49ers offense deployed George Kittle, it's what you said, Andrew. He was a fifth-round pick that just showcased great skills for the system. And then they start to feed off Kittle. It wasn't like they draft Kittle to be the guy that he is today. And you look at Gary Kubiak. He had Owen Daniels. He had Ryan Griffin drafted in Houston his first year now with the Jets. They don't have guys that just plug, play, and you run the system around him. This system is a system that puts linebackers in conflict all the time. And usually who covers tight ends are linebackers. And that's why basically tight ends succeed under the wide outside zone scheme. And that's why maybe Herndon has a great reappearance. Tyler Kroft becomes a guy that's more than just a blocker because the scheme puts the guy that covers them in conflict.
Yeah, we got a great group of guys that just have a variety of different talents. You got Wesco, who maybe plays more of a fullback position. And you got the bigger guys, the slower guys, but they're good inline guys. The guys you can rely on for chip blocks, the guys that can maybe protect the quarterback a little bit better. And then you got the move guys. You got Yaboa and Herndon. You got some variety in this group, and somebody's going to emerge as probably a receiving star. Who that is, I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah, I agree with both you guys. I think it's only a matter of time before whoever becomes the lead guy in the tight end room emerges, and they may not be amazing, but they will be the clear lead guy. And we're going to talk into all the players in a minute, and we'll get into who we think that is. But this system, and Vitor, you nailed it, put linebackers in conflict. Tight ends usually are covered by linebackers, and especially with the wide zone in particular, the most common play off the wide zone is the boot action, and it's the tight end coming across on the little flat route. Or he's backside and he pretends like he's doing a cut block and leaks out the back end. That's just easy yards. These guys just get to catch the ball in space and run for 6 yards before anyone even gets close to him. When you get a guy that's a tight end that's that big, that's strong, up to speed and give him some room to run, sometimes they can break some tackles. Sometimes they can get going. That's why George Kittle is so fantastic, is that he's as big and as fast and as strong as he is. He can still run through contact, break tackles, and take advantage of the space he's given. The tight ends are going to have space. It's going to up to be seen what they do with it. I think that's the overarching point that we're going to make from this episode is that this scheme, as with most other players, as we're going to talk about and have talked about, is just going to elevate the players. And that stands for tight end just as much as anything else. All right, so why don't we lead it off, get straight into the roster here. I think the logical place to start would be with the longest tenured guy in the room, and that would be Chris Herndon. So I believe, Matt, you have Chris Herndon, correct?
I think I do. Yeah, I do.
All right, Matt, go ahead. Take it away.
So after a roaring start to his career, Herndon's stock has fallen off the proverbial cliff. To start 2019 season, Chris was suspended 4 games for violating the substance abuse policy. Then, to add insult to injury, he hurt his hamstring, and this delayed everything even more. He didn't get in till about week 10, I believe, and he didn't do much at anything. He looked like a fish out of water. And then on top of that, then he hurt his ribs. So it was a lost season in 2019. And 2020 proved to be not much better. He was able to stay healthy. That's good. But he played all 16 games, but he didn't really click. And most importantly, he didn't really produce. There were flashes near the end of the season, but really not enough to really give us any kind of confidence that he can stay consistent. So here's the question for 2021. Is Herndon going to be the guy at tight end? In my opinion, I don't think so. Consistency is just not something I've seen with Chris. And we could blame any number of things for this. We could blame Gase. We could blame his injuries. We can name a few things. But in the end, until he proves otherwise, I think we should continue to think that he's going to be inconsistent. If Herndon can turn things around and become more consistent, we'll be getting a huge weapon in the passing game. We know Chris is big and athletic. When you look at his flashes, you see a tight end who can make tough catches and come down with big plays. And as a blocker, Chris has held up very well in pass protection. He only gave up 4 pressures last year in 109 pass blocking opportunities. As a run blocker, he's been very average. He does need to improve in this area. He has the tools to be great. It's just up to him to put it all together. And Chris knows this too. He's very aware that he needs to take the next step and become more consistent. I'm looking forward to seeing if he actually can. What do you guys think?
When you go back to Herndon's best games, he was under Jeremy Bates, who also ran the wide zone system. He got Herndon in favorable spots. Herndon is an athletic guy that I believe needs to get in rhythm and confident early. I think I agree with you, Matt. His mental is his biggest issue here because sometimes he looks like he's not in this planet. He suffered a fumble against Buffalo last year that he was clearly not, with his head in the game. He was in another planet. And if you start to feed Herndon early in games, I feel like he gets going. He gets in rhythm. And that's what Jeremy Bates did late in the 2019 season. You get some boot action, get Herndon early on quick flats, crossers, and he gets it going. Because as you said, Matt, we all know Herndon has the physicality. He's big. He is fast for his size. He can block well, especially in the passing game. Adam Gase last year utilized him as a 6th offensive lineman basically all the time on third downs, what also hampered his development early and getting going in games. He was like, okay, I'm going to block. And he usually just didn't care much. And I believe that a new coaching staff, I even wrote an article about that, a new coaching staff can bring out the best Herndon because of what Andrew said. You're going to run the ball wide to the outside. Linebackers will be moving to the wrong way, to the wrong side, because Herndon will be going flat, crosser, and he's fast. He can break some tackles. And, as we saw late in the season, Herndon was getting confident in the red zone. Caught some tough passes, a tough seam route against the Patriots. He got hammered in the middle of the field. He has all the tools. I believe he just needs a coaching staff that gets him going and allows him to be confident in his game.
Yeah, I'm right with you guys. I'm right there with you. He needs someone to light a fire under him. And if there's no one better to start fires than Robert Saleh. I really hope that the coaching staff goes to him and gives him the chance to use all that athletic talent and put it together and be in a better situation before they just kind of write him off as somebody that they didn't take. And, they're evaluating everybody equally, which I think they should. But I would really love to see them give Chris Herndon kind of like the first crack, because I think out of everybody that we're going to talk about today, that he is the most athletically gifted of any player. And I think his ceiling is the highest out of anybody we're going to talk about today. If he can put it all together, we got a really, really solid player. I think what's happened is, as with the rest of the Jets, obviously, but I think Herndon has kind of regressed to the mean because he was a 4th round pick. And as a rookie with Sam Darnold, he played better than a 4th-round pick. He played like maybe an early 3rd-round pick, maybe even a late 2nd-round pick at tight end at times. He was absolutely unguardable in the Colts game. And there was flashes of a guy that was going to be a starting caliber player and more than just a quality one for a while. And then Adam Gase and the new offense and everything else that came with it, and Sam Darnold mono and not having chemistry and anything you want to label, it just all kind of fell back down to earth. And the last 2 years, they've kind of just bottomed out. And it really, really makes me want to see this guy get the chance to succeed because his talent is evident. We've all talked about it. We're all going to say that's the thing to talk about with Chris Herndon is his talent. And in the right situation, especially on the boot concepts and potentially leaks, I think he can really do some damage. And if not, then I'm not sure. Then I think that kind of is your answer. This is kind of like it's put up or shut up time for Herndon, where if this isn't the situation where we start to see improvement, then I don't know what will be.
One thing you mentioned is those flashes in his rookie year where he looked well above his draft position.
Right.
But at the same time, maybe it wasn't as often as last year, but you would see the flashes of the bad as well. He can make these incredible catches that would make your head spin. But at the same time, he would drop these very easy passes that everybody should be catching. So he showed inconsistency even when at his best. And now it's like you said, he's just back to earth now. Now we're seeing maybe what he truly is, and we need to wait and see if he can go beyond that.
All right, well, that's going to lead us to the next guy on the list. Vitor, I'm going to have you take it away with Ryan Griffin because he's, like we talked about, experienced in the system more so than anybody else. And I think actually over the last handful of years has probably been the most consistently productive tight end on the roster.
Yeah, Griffin was drafted by Gary Kubiak. He only played 1 year under Kubiak because the Texans then hired Bill Bryan. But Ryan Griffin, man, he's a guy that he's solid. If Ryan Griffin is the Jets like number 4 tight end this year or number 3 tight end this year, the Jets are fine. We don't know what Herndon's going to be. Croft, we don't know how he's going to be utilized. If it's going to be majorly a blocker. Griffin gives the Jets something, a guy that, he backed up Owen Daniels, the guy that Andrew, you were saying was a product of the system. Griffin backed him up, learned from him. He knows the system, knows the scheme. And, let's forget 2020 for a second because everyone sucked on that offense besides Mekhi Becton.
Right.
In 2019, Ryan Griffin stepped it up and we didn't even miss Chris Herndon. He played really well. He was Sam Darnold's go-to guy in many occasions. It was basically him and Jameson Crowder owning the middle of the field. He scored 2 touchdowns against the Jaguars, got a touchdown against the Washington Redskins and a couple big plays. He's a solid football player. And something that I've seen from the Shanahan tree, Shanahan did this a lot in Atlanta. He went empty out of 3 tight end sets, 13 personnel. 3 tight ends, a running back and a receiver, and Shanahan was playing empty sets. And if the Jets want to go some empty sets with 3 tight ends, they have Herndon, they have Griffin, and they have Kroft. And Griffin is a guy that can see some mismatches here. Crossing routes, he's a guy that can stretch the seam, even though he's not the fastest player in the field. I feel like Ryan Griffin could find, a spot here to get a season of like 30 receptions, 200 yards, something like that, a couple touchdowns, and be a serviceable guy. 3rd tight end that makes plays, is solid, is reliable. I really like Ryan Griffin.
Yeah, he's a solid vet, and he knows how to attack coverages and use leverage. I don't think he's going to be the kind of guy that you're going to want to stretch the field with. He doesn't have that kind of speed. He likes to use his size. He wants to box out defenders. He'll be the guy that gets open on those leaks, the backside stuff. He's going to use his savviness and his size to his advantage.
He's a guy who could see the Jets using on early down passing packages. Like the Jets are going 12 and they're going to run stick. They can go with 2 play calls, like wide zone to the left. If the quarterback kills, they're going to run stick. Ryan Griffin is a guy that can run the stick really well. He sits out linebackers. He knows how to read leverage. I think he's a guy that can be utilized on this offense. and he's a forgotten man right now.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I might actually be a little higher on him than you guys are, because if you had to make me bet on the one player in this room to be the guy like I talked about earlier, I actually think it's Ryan Griffin. I think he was the best. I think he's the best natural fit in the scheme as the combination of passing threat and blocking threat. He's a solid blocker, and he's a more consistent threat in the passing game. And he just knows how to get open, and he knows how to settle in zones. He understands some of the little things about the position that we don't see in a Chris Herndon. And I think that's what's really going to help him in this scheme more than anyone else, because this game is all about craftiness. This game is all about being tricky and sneaky and making everything look the same pre-snap just to change it up post-snap. And Ryan Griffin is a guy that understands that. I really think the consistency of it based, context aside, looking at everything as a whole, what he was able to do given the circumstances he was in, I think is pretty respectable. I honestly think it's pretty solid for what you could have expected him as a low-level free agent signing at tight end. In this scheme, I think he could only produce even better. I have the clip in my head. I've forgotten about it just until the other day, doing research for this episode, where you talked about it, Vitor. It was against the Jaguars, where he had 2 touchdowns in that game, and one of which was just a simple stop route and just a sit under zone, and he catches it and turns and runs for about 20 yards, and no one even touches it.
Yep.
That's the type of guy that I think in this scheme, with given more opportunities to get in space, maybe he's faster than we think he is. Maybe he's better after the catch than we think he is. And I really am going to put my stake on, if I had to pick one of these guys, I think Ryan Griffin is going to be a contributor on this team. I really do.
I hope so. And this touchdown against the Jaguars, Sam Darnold was hesitant to throw a touchdown. We ran a spot with a wheel by, I think, Le'Veon Bell or the running back. And Darnold was like, I want to throw the wheel. And Griffin, give me the ball. He threw it to Griffin after 3 seconds of being wide open. And Griffin just plays to the end zone. He was really fast on that play. He played really well that game. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if anybody's going to be the safety pick, it's going to be Griffin. If you want one guy that you can put your money on and be like, all right, this guy's most likely to fit in this scheme and thrive, it's Griffin. Everybody else is kind of a wild card or a role player, but Griffin's the guy that you can probably rely on the most.
Well, from one guy that can be relied on to a new face entirely, I'm going to take on Tyler Kroft, a former Buffalo tight end and also former Cincinnati Bengal. Now, Tyler Kroft is interesting because he only had 12 catches last year. He played in every game, but he only had 12 catches. He was mainly used as a blocker, and Buffalo really kind of turned away from running the ball as the season went on, as they discovered Josh Allen and how effective he was. And Croft didn't quite have the opportunities as other players, but he only had 12 catches. He had 3 touchdowns and 12 catches. So that's pretty dang efficient, especially if you were talking about touchdown to catch ratio. And if you go back to 2017 in Cincinnati, it was his best season of his career. He caught 42 balls, he had 404 yards, 7 touchdowns that year. So he's been able to be productive beyond just being a blocking tight end. Those numbers don't blow the doors off anybody, but as a number 2 tight end and number potentially 3 tight end, not your starting go-to receiving tight end, those are solid numbers. I think in a different system, he's not going to get the target volume to get numbers up to that quite caliber, but I think he's going to get more targets than he did in Buffalo. And this could be a guy that finishes the year with maybe 25 or 30 catches and 4 or 5 of them are touchdowns. And he's a knock your ass out blocker the whole time. I think this is a really solid depth signing. Don't expect anything amazing, but I think for what he is, the Jets are getting exactly what they need and exactly what they expect. And that's all you can hope for.
Yep. I think that's exactly what his role is going to be. He's going to be a near the line guy that's going to knock your ass out in blocking. I think he had 1 receiving play over 20 yards last year. And I think it was blown coverage against the Jets. So he's not going to be the guy that you're sending downfield. He's going to be near the line. He's going to be a warrior. And I'm okay with him playing that role. I can see him thriving in that role. It's nothing special. I mean, it's going to, his role will open up everything else for everybody else. And I'm okay with that. I'm not expecting him to be the guy.
I feel like Croft was a great, once again, value signing by Douglas because he came off from a team that played mostly all the snaps on 10 personnel. That means no tight ends on field. So Croft, he didn't have much to show in Buffalo last year. And he's going from a system that didn't care about him to a system that needs him. And I feel like this is good for a player that's young as Croft. He's going to come in for the Jets and say, hey, I'm going to give my life here. I'm going to block the hell out of the running game here. And maybe if Croft is so great, he's that much better than everyone else as a run blocker, he can get some snaps as our lone tight end in 21 personnel sets, being the guy that is the strong side of the wide zone, or maybe cutting back side on split zone action because he can move and he can block on a move. I feel like Croft would be my guy to say, maybe, just maybe, this guy is our tight end one. You guys said Griffin. I also think that Herndon needs to get the first crack, but I think Croft is low-key good all around. From what I saw in Buffalo when they utilized him as a pass catcher, he is fluid. He's a fluid mover. I thought he was going to be much, much, much more much slower, and he's not. I feel like maybe Croft is a guy that the Jets utilize as their tight end one because he's so good as a run blocker that he'll open things up for himself in the passing game.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, actually, because as we've talked about at length over disguising play calls and making everything look the same, if your run blocking tight end one is also your receiving tight end one, now you don't have a tell, because swapping from Tyler Kroft on the strong side to Ryan Griffin on the strong side might tip pass or run. If Tyler Kroft can be serviceable enough in the passing game, you might actually make a better argument than we did, Vitor, for him to be the tight end one because of his combination of skill sets and how that affects the rest of the offense. I still think Griffin's talent receiving is going to make him a little more valuable, but it wouldn't be completely out of the range of possibility at all for Croft to potentially ascend into the role. I think especially the point you made, but that was dead on.
Yep. That's the way I see it too. I agree with you. Herndon needs the first crack, and if he's consistent, he's our tight end one, and this offense is going to be deadly. This offense can be deadly if Herndon plays like he did in his rookie year. But if Herndon keeps being an inconsistent football player, I feel like Kroft can step in and be just good. Just good. He's going to run block well. He's going to catch some passes. I like him. And I really, really like JD signing once again.
Yeah, solid debt move. Speaking of JD signings, that's going to lead us into the headliner of the undrafted free agent class, Kenny Yaboa. Matt, floor is yours.
So Yaboa is a guy I am very happy fell to us as an undrafted free agent. I had a mid-round grade for him, and I would have been more than happy if we drafted him. I guess going undrafted just adds another page to the book of people sort of underestimating Kenny. He wasn't recruited very heavily out of high school. He only got 2 offers from FBS schools. He ended up going to Temple under Matt Rule, actually. It was here that they put on weight and transitioned from wide receiver to tight end. It took about 2 years for Yaboa to sort of get his feet under him. But in 2019 was probably his best year at Temple. And even then, it wasn't really anything special. He graduated and entered the transfer portal. And then he just ended up going to Ole Miss. His 2 choices were Baylor or Ole Miss. But as soon as Roll left Baylor, is all right, I'm going to go to Lane Kiffin. And Lane Kiffin used him very well. He found himself at Ole Miss. He really hit his stride there. He became a very efficient blocker and receiver. He became an all-around talent. To quote Yaboa, I think of myself as a pass catcher and a blocker. I know a lot of people say it, but if you turn on the film, I block. I actually enjoy blocking. I enjoy pancaking people. I take pride in my blocking. If I miss a block, I'm going to get pissed off. And I like that. I like that he wants to get dirty. He wants to get his face in everybody else's face and just pancake people. I think that's something that people aren't really thinking about with him. I think they're thinking about what he did at Ole Miss as a receiver, and he's a lot more than that. And being that dual threat could give him the edge in this tight end room. In only 8 games, Yaboa was able to put up some very good numbers. He had 27 receptions for 524 yards and 6 touchdowns. And he had his best game against the best school in college football. He put up a $181 and 2 touchdowns against Crimson Tide. And then he opted out the rest of the season after week 8. And it's reasonable to think that those numbers would have been a lot better if he stayed. And there's also a chance that his decision to opt out was probably the reason why he went on undrafted. So if you look at the tight ends who succeed in the Shanahan style, like we said, you got guys that aren't really highly sought after, like we said before. And Yaboa sort of fits that to a T. He's the underrated guy that nobody really saw coming out of high school. Then he goes undrafted. And now he's in our crowded tight end room with a bunch of guys with serviceable backgrounds. You got guys like Herndon, who's an athletic freak. Where does he fit in this group? I think he has the potential to be the best of all of them and to be that guy in this tight end group. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think the potential is there. I'm going to co-sign what you said about him as a blocker. On his tape, he probably blocks more than he catches. And he's either the wing tight end and he's blocking on the backside, or he's playing strong side when Ole Miss runs their like zone plays, or a lot of times he does, like we talked about with Tyler Croft, he does the split action and he cracks down on the backside. He does that a lot, and he is not scared of getting his face in the trash and trying to lay somebody out. So that quote is an accurate one. I can attest to that, and that's definitely what you want. That's always a start. In order to be a good blocker, you have to want to be a good blocker. Length, strength, technique, all of that comes afterwards. And Yaboa's got the attitude. That's going to help him, like we said, with not tipping off runner pass. That's going to be huge for whoever our lead tight end is as well. And it's important to note that he was a priority free agent for the Jets. That this was a guy they really, really wanted and probably had a lot of debates about taking at some point in the later rounds of the draft. Once they realized that he was probably going to go undrafted, it did not take long for them to get on the phone and get this guy signed. And that definitely speaks volumes, because the offensive coaches know what they're looking for this type of position. They scout for roles. They just try and find players to fit their roles. There's a difference between a role player and someone who fits a role. They need someone to do very specific things at every particular position. And we talked about it all draft season. We talked about running backs, their speed and one-cut ability. We talked about receivers being able to win on vertical routes and over the middle on deep crosses. We talked about offensive linemen being fleet and agile for zone blocking. They have particular skill sets, and Yaboa fits very, very well in this particular skill set. The number one thing I think for him is going to be transitioning and understanding the playbook, because going from the Lane Kiffin offense to the Shanahan wide zone is night and day. And it's going to be consistency in getting a bigger share of targets. How is he going to hold up when he's getting targeted a lot more than he was in college? And speaking of the Ole Miss or the Alabama game, he did receive a handful of targets in that game. A handful of them were schemed targets from Lane Kiffin where he was not even covered. And that might happen with our scheme too, but are we going to have a guy that can be reliant when it's 3rd and 6 and we need a guy to convert an 8-yard catch? Are you going to be consistent and box out your guy and get open and be the safety valve, or are you going to be the guy that needs to be schemed open? I think it's all about consistency with Yaboa.
Yeah, what you said, Andrew, is exactly what I think. You're going from an offense that's ran by Lane Kiffin to one that's ran by a Shanahan discipline, right? It's completely different. And he's an undrafted free agent. Yeah, so you got to temper your expectations. I feel like Yaboa has tons of potential, and he may be stashed in the practice squad. What I was going to ask you guys is, do you guys think that if the Jets place him in the practice squad, someone tries to claim him? That's something the Jets need to think about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they love Yaboa, they might have to, utilize a roster spot to protect him. Is he ready to play? Does he deserve a roster spot in a tight end room that already has Herndon, Croft, Griffin? I don't know. It's going to be tough. I feel like he's going to come out as our fourth tight end. He's going to show just enough in training camp to make this roster.
Yeah, I would say about maybe 4 tight ends, and maybe Wesco joins as a fullback.
Yeah, that's going to be it for me.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's exactly where it could line up. I think if he gets to the practice squad, someone will steal him. So it's important to keep him on the active roster. And I think Wesco will probably, quite honestly, change positions to be listed as a fullback. And he will just be the full-time Kyle Juszczyk. I think that's a good transition into Wesco. That's who Vitor is going to cover next. So tell us about our potential new Juszczyk.
Well, that's too much for Wesco, but hey, he's going to play this role, man. He's going to be your fullback. If the Jets are in I formation, he's going to be your fullback. He's going to lead their outside zones, our wide zones. He's going to get their backsides and running split zones out of I formations. And, I low-key like Wesco in the open field. He is a tough runner, man. He's a tough guy to bring down. He's big, he's strong, he runs with a purpose. He's not as athletic fluid as Juszczyk. Juszczyk, he is a freak. He can run like his slot receiver sometimes does. He's like a bigger slot receiver when he's lined up there, and he still can kills you when he's blocking to the run. He's aggressive and all those things. But Wesco, he's a guy that we're going to see a lot in the field this year. We saw some from Gaze last year, as Gaze also ran some lead outside zones. We're going to see much more of Wesco this year. And I feel like Wesco is a guy, he's going to be a solid fullback. He's not going to be Juszczyk, not going to be Tony Richardson, but it's going to be solid. He can get the job done. He can lead your outside zones. And if the Jets want to run some boot action and get Wesco on the flat, he's going to be just fine. What I don't think Wesco is capable of doing is doing what the 49ers did with Juszczyk. Let's go with 21 personnel, but we're going to line up as if we were in 11 with Juszczyk as our slot receiver. I don't think the Jets are going to do that with Wesco. But the Jets have so many pieces right now, 6 wide receivers that can play, 3 tight ends that can play, running backs that can line up everywhere. That Wesco being this role player, this guy that's going to lead the runs, catch some passes in the flat, he's going to be just fine. Wesco is a guy that I think Jets fans, this is my prediction for Wesco, are going to like this year. Like, we have Wesco. He's a tough guy. He has that mentality that I really like. And that's it. What do you guys think?
I agree. He is a tough guy. And I am really looking forward to seeing him in this new role. But he just needs to do a lot better. Because even though he hasn't really been asked to do much, he hasn't really done anything great either. He's been pretty average in just about everything, maybe even below average in pass blocking. So he's got to really step it up if he wants to be talked about as the next Juszczyk, which I don't think he'll ever be. I don't even think I'll be happy if he even lives up to just be Wesco.
Yeah, I think he was solid last year, run blocking,
Yeah, I do too, actually. I thought he was solid run blocking too. I thought it was more of a combination of where they were asking him to get to. And if you're a fullback and they're asking you to get to the edge and seal the edge, it's a lot tougher than if you're doing a bob block on a backer in the inside. And it's that, I think, is situation is going to be different from him. The Juszczyk thing was a joke. I'll be very clear about that right now in case people didn't get that. I was not a serious comp. That is worlds better than we think we would hope for him to be. But I think he can be a solid fullback. And what the fullback, like we talked about with George Kittle, this is a good transition point, where George Kittle elevated the 49ers scheme and allowed them to do things with their tight end that they normally wouldn't do. The same thing can be said for Kyle Juszczyk. And that doesn't mean that our fullback has to do the same things. Would it be great if we had a fullback that we could split out and run option routes with? Yeah, sure. But we don't need one. As long as they can just be a willing blocker, get to their spots in the run game, know their assignments, and just create lanes and every now and again leak out into the flat, catch the ball in space and run for some extra yards. That's all they need to do. That's all they're going to need to do, and just be solid at those handful of tasks, and you'll be a fine fullback in this system. I think Wesco has the tools to do it. And like we talked about with Kenny Yaboa, I think even more so with Trayvon Wesco, he has the attitude. He wants to knock your head off when he is coming at you. And that was kind of his issue in run blocking, is sometimes he would get over aggressive and he'd be coming so hard to try and knock somebody out that he would overrun the angle and he'd miss entirely. And the guy would just shoot inside of him and make the tackle. Where if he can just tone it down a little bit and play with a little more discipline, he's got the attitude to be a great blocking back.
Yeah, I agree. You know, in the 49ers, they used Juszczyk and Kittle that way because they did not have Elijah Moore, Denzel Mims, and Corey Davis. They were much more limited than the Jets on the perimeter, right? The Jets have skill players. So if Wesco is only good at lead blocking on the running game, just do it, you know, so be it. And they won't need Wesco to line up on the outside and run option routes. That's it.
Yeah, I agree. That's gonna take us to the last guy on our list. That's gonna be Daniel Brown, who I'm gonna cover. Now, Daniel Brown is interesting. He signed for I believe it was just a 1-year deal at the time, and they re-signed him at the end of 2019. Was free agent a couple of years ago. In his 2-year career with the Jets, he has a grand total of 9 catches. He has 1 touchdown out of those 9 catches in 2 years. And despite playing all 16 games in 2020, and I believe all 16 games in 2019 as well, yes, he only caught 2 balls in 2020. Where I'm going to make the point now. We were worried about Kenny Yaboa. If he goes on the practice squad, are we going to use the roster spot to keep another tight end? And are we worried about that? If it was up to me, Daniel Brown would be released already, because I don't think he has a future on this team or a place on the roster. I think they have other tight ends that have shown to be obviously more talented and more capable of the opportunities they're given. Yes, he's had more of a blocker role, but Daniel Brown hasn't been that excellent of a blocker to where you're sitting there going, oh, he's a good blocking tight end. If he was a good blocking tight end, then why'd you sign Tyler Kroft? That kind of leads me to Brown is the guy I think there's no way he makes this team. And I think that him being gone from the team gives another spot for Yaboa to step into and potentially take his roster spot. We'll see how things go into training camp and in the future, but I have not seen anything from Daniel Brown in 2 years that would make me perfectly sit there and square away safe with his roster spot on this team at all.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen nothing. And yeah, what does he do better than anybody else?
Right.
And the answer is nothing.
What does he do at all?
At all. So he's just a camp body to me.
Yeah, you know, not to say he did nothing, but he scored a nice touchdown against the Washington football team in 2019. But besides that, Daniel Brown has done nothing for the Jets. And this is a tight end room that has a lot of talent. If Yaboa shows just enough to be your fourth tight end, even though he's not ready, you keep Yaboa over Daniel Brown. It's a no-brainer. You know, I'm with you guys here.
Yep. The only way I see him making it is if there's an injury or if Yaboa shows absolutely nothing. And I don't see that happening.
No, I don't see that happening either. I think at that point, even if Yaboa shows absolutely nothing, if it's not a character issue, if it's just maybe he doesn't quite get the playbook yet, or he's getting acclimated to the speed of the game, I say you cut your losses as the undrafted rookie for a year, give him the roster spot to stash him, and say we'll deal with him next year. I wouldn't sacrifice Kenny Yaboa for Daniel Brown. Unless Kenny Yaboa, again, there's not, no, I'm not saying there is. I have no idea to wonder, assuming there isn't. But unless there's some character issue that becomes a problem, if it ever was a problem or is a problem at all, then I would say there's no reason not to keep Yaboa over Daniel Brown.
How about this? Would you wouldn't sacrifice Yaboa for Brown? Would you sacrifice Yaboa for Zach Ertz?
Yep. But I would sacrifice Brian Griffin, maybe. I really like Ertz.
I like Ertz too. I don't know if he has the explosion and the speed necessarily of some of the younger guys anymore, but I mean he's just a veteran player that knows what he's doing, that has been, productive from the second he got into the NFL. And you want to talk about a guy that can be a safety blanket for your rookie quarterback. I mean, a tight end like Zach Ertz is pretty hard to find somebody better than that.
Yeah, but the talk was like Crowder for Ertz, and I think Crowder's not leaving anymore. So
yeah, Crowder, yep. Crowder just recently restructured he redid his contract. I don't think we got numbers out yet for how much of a cut he's taking, but I'm very happy to see him coming back. And yeah, there was talks.
He's now a free agent after this year.
Yep.
So however they moved around the money, I imagine that they lowered his base salary for this year, but it was still more than he probably would have get if he was outright released. And now he has the opportunity to play 1 year instead of 2 and be a free agent again before he's 30, which is good for Jamison Crowder too. I mean, I think we've covered the tight ends well. We can end on this real quick because it's relevant, but not to go too off on a tangent. I think this was the best case scenario for both sides.
Yep. I agree. Crowder can hit the open market again next year. He'll be like 28. Right. He gets money on the Jets now that he wouldn't have gotten elsewhere if the Jets cut him. And the Jets, they maintain their depth chart at wide receiver with Jameson Crowder being there, a veteran guy, reliable guy. Everybody wins.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a possibility that they went with this pay cut to make him a more desirable trade option?
I'm going to say no, because I think if they were really planning with the intention of trading him, you do it after you draft Elijah Moore. And you do it in the middle of that. Get what you can for that draft. Because if they were sky high on Elijah Moore, they would have taken him in the first round, and had no problems about it. So they were sold on Elijah Moore, whether he fell to them or not. They were sold, and they were going to pick him at 23. So if you're going to take this guy at 23, he falls to you in the second round. You have a starting slot receiver already that you're planning on trading. Why not get some ammo for the draft you're in right at that moment and see if you can't flip something faster than say, let's wait until June or July and then we trade him to it for a late round pick. I'd rather have a 5th during the draft than a 7th now.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think for that reason, they did this to keep him on the team this year, because I think they want him to mentor Elijah Moore.
Yeah, I think they really value Crowder.
Yeah.
Yep. If it was a move to move him for Ertz straight up, that would be one thing. But other than that, I think it's definitely worth keeping him around. He's the kind of guy that's just going to work for his quarterback. And for a rookie quarterback that might need all the help he can get, that's very valuable.
Yeah. I mean, the guy stayed productive despite Adam Gase. That counts for something.
It does. That's because I think a lot of his work is outside of the structure of the offense. He's so good at recognizing coverages and altering his routes based on that.
Yeah.
That's great for a rookie quarterback. That's absolutely great for a rookie to have a guy that knows how to settle in between zones, understand coverages, go where the coverage isn't going to be. And that's how Zach Wilson reads defenses. It could be a really, really good match. I think it could be, I think it's a great depth move. I think it's a good move all around. That's all. It's just a good move.
For the tight ends, who do we have any bold predictions?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm going to say Ryan Griffin goes for 750 yards and 8 touchdowns.
Wow.
8 touchdowns?
8.
Okay. I'm going to say Herndon loses not only the number 1, but also the number 2 tight end spot. He ends up being tight end 3 with Yaboa coming out of nowhere and becoming the guy. And ending up with maybe 400 yards, 5 touchdowns.
I'm going to stand for Herndon here. 800 yards, 5 touchdowns, and the Jets give him a new deal for his Herndon.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for the tight end episode, guys. This has been a fun one. I'm your host, Andrew. You can find me at AndrewGolden_17. Guys, drop our handles. Call it a day.
Matt, you can find me at Zazzy Jets.
And you can find me at Vitor Paiva.
This has been the Oklahoma Drill Podcast at OKD Podcast on Twitter. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will be back next week. Bye. Back next week. Bye. Back next week.